The sun was setting on a small ranch on the outskirts of Deer Lodge, Montana Territory, when Tessa O'Connor's screams pierced the early summer evening of 1875, sending birds scattering from nearby trees and causing the horses in the corral to stamp their hooves nervously. "Push, Miss O'Connor." "I can see the head," urged Mrs. Whitaker, the midwife who had reluctantly agreed to attend the birth despite the scandal surrounding Tessa's condition. 20-year-old Tessa gripped the bedsheets, her knuckles white with strain, her copper hair plastered to her forehead with sweat. 9 months ago, she had been the respectable daughter of Deer Lodge's general store owner. Now, she was the subject of whispers, stares, and outright condemnation. "One more push," Mrs. Whitaker commanded. With a final, agonizing effort, Tessa felt her first child slide into the world, the infant's wails filling the small bedroom of her father's ranch house. "A boy," announced Mrs. Whitaker, quickly wrapping the squalling infant in a clean cloth. Tessa barely had time to glimpse her son before another contraction seized her. Her eyes widened in surprise and fear. "There's another one coming," Mrs. Whitaker exclaimed, her professional demeanor slipping for just a moment. "Lord have mercy, it's twins." 15 minutes later, Tessa lay exhausted but filled with wonder as Mrs. Whitaker placed 2 swaddled infants beside her, a boy and a girl with tufts of reddish hair just like their mothers. "They're perfect," Tessa whispered, tears streaming down her face as she touched their tiny fingers. Mrs. Whitaker's expression softened momentarily before hardening again. "You know what this means, don't you? One child born out of wedlock is shameful enough. Twins will only make your situation worse." Tessa swallowed hard. "I don't care what people say. They're my children, and I'll protect them with everything I have." The midwife shook her head. "You're young and don't understand how cruel this world can be. 2 babes and no husband, your life in Deer Lodge is over." As if to emphasize this point, heavy footsteps thundered up the stairs and the bedroom door flew open. Patrick O'Connor, Tessa's father, stood in the doorway, his face flushed with anger and whiskey. "Twins," he spat, his eyes narrowing as he stared at the tiny bundles. As if one bastard wasn't enough disgrace for this family. "Father, please," Tessa began, instinctively drawing her babies closer. "I want you and those children out of my house by the end of the week," Patrick declared, his voice cold and final. "You've brought nothing but shame to the O'Connor name." "But where will I go?" Tessa asked, though she'd been half expecting this outcome since the day she'd revealed her pregnancy. Her father's expression remained unmoved. "That's not my concern anymore. You made your choice when you lay with that no-good drifter who abandoned you. Now you'll live with the consequences." With that, he turned and left, the slam of the door causing both infants to start crying. Mrs. Whitaker sighed heavily. "You can stay at my place for a few days, but then you'll need to figure something out. My reputation can't afford to be associated with your situation for too long." Tessa nodded numbly, focusing on soothing her newborns rather than the crumbling of her life around her. "I'll name you Daniel," she whispered to her son, "and you'll be Elizabeth," she told her daughter. "We'll be all right somehow." But as the days passed, Tessa discovered just how difficult life could be for a single mother of twins in a small frontier town like Deer Lodge. Her father publicly disowned her. The local church minister suggested she give the children up for adoption, and former friends crossed the street to avoid speaking with her. After a week at Mrs. Whitaker's, Tessa moved into a small, dilapidated cabin on the edge of town that no one else wanted because of its leaky roof and drafty walls. She took in laundry and mending to earn a meager living, working with her twins sleeping in a makeshift cradle nearby. Summer turned to autumn, and as the first snow of winter dusted the Montana landscape, Tessa found herself growing desperate. The twins were nearly 5 months old, healthy despite their circumstances, but Tessa was growing thinner. She often went without food to ensure she could continue nursing them, and firewood was becoming scarce. One bitterly cold November morning, she wrapped the twins warmly and ventured into town for supplies, her head held high despite the stares and whispers that followed her. She was examining the prices of dried beans at Wilson's Mercantile when the bell above the door jangled. "Well, if it isn't Hunter Quinn, back from the wild country," exclaimed Mr. Wilson, his voice filled with genuine warmth that Tessa hadn't heard directed at herself in months. She turned slightly, curious despite herself. A tall man in a worn leather coat stood stomping snow from his boots. His dark hair was longer than was fashionable, curling slightly at his collar, and a neatly trimmed beard framed a face tanned by outdoor living. He couldn't have been more than 30, with laugh lines around eyes that crinkled when he smiled. "Good to see you too, Wilson," the man replied, his voice deep and pleasant with a slight Texas drawl. "Montana's looking to have a harsh winter. Thought I'd better stock up before the passes get completely snowed in." As the two men conversed about cattle prices and winter preparations, Tessa tried to make herself inconspicuous, selecting the smallest bag of beans she could afford. Daniel began fussing in the sling across her chest, and she gently bounced to quiet him, but the movement woke Elizabeth, who began to cry in earnest. The conversation halted abruptly as all eyes turned to her. Mr. Wilson's friendly expression dissolved into one of cold disapproval. "You'd best take those babies outside, Miss O'Connor," he said stiffly. "They're disturbing my customers." Tessa felt her cheeks burn with humiliation, but she lifted her chin. "I haven't finished my shopping, Mr. Wilson." "Then finish it quickly and be on your way," he replied curtly, turning his back on her to resume his conversation with the newcomer. Tessa fumbled with her meager coins, trying to calculate if she could afford both beans and flour, all while attempting to soothe Elizabeth. She was so focused on her task that she didn't notice the cowboy approaching until his shadow fell across the counter. "Excuse me, madam," he said quietly. "Would you mind if I held one of your little ones while you finish your shopping? My sister has 4 children, so I've had some practice." Tessa stared up at him in surprise. It was the first kind offer she'd received from a stranger in months. That's very kind of you, Mr. Quinn, but I couldn't impose," she replied hesitantly. "It's no imposition," he insisted, his hazel eyes warm and honest. "And please call me Hunter." After a moment's hesitation, Tessa carefully transferred Elizabeth to his arms. To her amazement, the baby girl immediately stopped crying and stared up at the stranger's bearded face with fascination. "She's got your eyes," Hunter observed with a smile. "What's her name?" "Elizabeth," Tessa replied, still stunned by this unexpected kindness. "And this is Daniel," she added, nodding toward her son who was now contentedly snuggled against her chest. "Twins," Hunter said with admiration. "That's quite a blessing." The word blessing struck Tessa deeply. No one had referred to her children that way since they were born. To everyone in Deer Lodge, they were her shame, her burden, her fall from grace, never a blessing. Mr. Wilson cleared his throat disapprovingly. "Quinn, you don't know the situation here. Miss O'Connor's circumstances are irregular." Hunter's expression didn't change as he gently rocked Elizabeth. "I don't see anything irregular about a mother shopping for her children, Wilson." The storekeeper's face reddened slightly, but before he could respond, the door opened again, admitting Mrs. Hampton, the banker's wife and one of the town's most prominent gossips. "Mr. Wilson, I need," she began, then stopped abruptly at the sight of Tessa. Her gaze traveled from Tessa to Hunter holding Elizabeth, and her eyes widened. "Well," she said archly, "I see Miss O'Connor has found herself another victim." Tessa felt as though she'd been slapped. "Mrs. Hampton, it's not, I was just helping a neighbor," Hunter interrupted smoothly. "As any decent person would do." Mrs. Hampton sniffed. "Neighbor." "I wasn't aware Miss O'Connor had any claim to respectability in this town anymore. Not after she—" "Madam," Hunter cut in, his voice still polite but with a new edge of steel. "Where I come from, we don't speak ill of mothers in front of their children." An uncomfortable silence fell over the store. Tessa quickly gathered her purchases, mortified and yet touched by this stranger's defense. "Thank you," she murmured as Hunter carefully returned Elizabeth to her, "for everything." He tipped his hat to her. "My pleasure, Miss O'Connor." Tessa hurried from the store, feeling Mrs. Hampton's glare boring into her back. She hadn't made it halfway down the street before she heard boots crunching in the snow behind her. "Miss O'Connor, wait up." She turned to see Hunter Quinn jogging toward her, carrying a large canvas bag. He caught up to her, slightly out of breath, a cloud of vapor forming in the cold air. "You forgot some of your supplies," he said, holding out the bag. Tessa frowned in confusion. "No, I didn't. I only bought beans and a small sack of flour." Hunter glanced around, then lowered his voice. "Let's just say I added a few things that might help with those little ones through the winter. No strings attached, just one neighbor helping another." Tessa's eyes filled with tears as she glimpsed the contents: coffee, sugar, dried apples, a small sack of potatoes, and what looked like a package of beef jerky. "I can't accept this," she whispered, though her stomach clenched at the thought of refusing such bounty. "Sure you can," he replied easily. "Consider it my way of welcoming myself back to Deer Lodge. I've been away for almost 2 years, driving cattle up from Texas." When she still hesitated, he added, "I'd take it as a personal favor if you'd accept. Makes me feel useful, and that's something a man needs." Tessa relented, accepting the bag with trembling hands. "Thank you, Mr. Quinn." "Hunter," he corrected with a smile. "And if you don't mind my asking, where are you headed with these little ones in this cold?" "Home," Tessa replied. "I have a cabin on the eastern edge of town." Hunter frowned. "Old Jenkins' place. That's nearly a mile from here, and the snow's coming down harder." As if to confirm his words, the wind gusted, driving icy flakes into their faces. Elizabeth whimpered and Daniel burrowed deeper into Tessa's shawl. "My horse is tied up behind the store," Hunter said. "Let me give you a ride home. These little ones shouldn't be out in this weather any longer than necessary." Every lesson in propriety that Tessa had ever learned told her to refuse, but the twins were already getting cold, and the walk home would be miserable in the strengthening storm. Still, she hesitated. "People will talk," she warned. Hunter's laugh was warm and genuine. "Miss O'Connor, I get the distinct impression they're already talking. What's one more log on that fire?" 10 minutes later, Tessa found herself seated sideways on Hunter's strong bay gelding, the twins secure in her arms, while Hunter led the horse on foot through the thickening snow. By the time they reached her cabin, the storm had developed into a full blizzard. Hunter helped her inside, looking around with a critical eye at the drafty cabin with its patched roof and poorly sealed windows. Without being asked, he built up the fire in her small stove, then checked her woodpile. "This won't last 3 days in weather like this," he observed, frowning. "I know," Tessa admitted. "I was planning to gather more tomorrow." Hunter shook his head. "You'll do no such thing. I'll bring you more wood before the day's out." He glanced at the twins, now dozing peacefully in their cradle. "They're beautiful children, Miss O'Connor. You should be proud." "I am," she said softly, "even if no one else sees it that way." Hunter studied her for a long moment, his hazel eyes thoughtful. "People are quick to judge what they don't understand, especially in small towns like this. Tessa mustered a smile. Thank you again for your kindness today. I won't forget it. With a promise to return with firewood, Hunter left, venturing back into the howling storm. True to his word, he returned 2 hours later with a wagon loaded with split logs, enough to last at least 2 weeks. He stacked them neatly alongside her cabin, refused her offer of hot coffee, and disappeared back into the swirling snow. Tessa didn't expect to see him again. Men like Hunter Quinn, handsome, kind, respected, didn't associate with women like her once they learned of her disgrace. Yet to her surprise, he appeared at her door the next afternoon, his arms full of supplies. The storm's let up some, but there's another one brewing, he explained, stomping snow from his boots. Thought I'd check on you and the little ones. This pattern continued through December. Hunter would appear every few days, sometimes with firewood, sometimes with food, always with a smile and a kind word. He never asked about the twins' father, never judged her situation, and always treated her with a respect she'd almost forgotten she deserved. The townsfolk noticed, of course. Gossip spread quickly that Hunter Quinn, whose family had once owned one of the largest cattle operations in the territory before he'd gone off to Texas, was spending time with that O'Connor girl and her bastards. Some said he was just being charitable. Others suggested more salacious motivations. One snowy evening as Christmas approached, Hunter sat by Tessa's fire, bouncing Daniel on his knee while she prepared a simple supper. Elizabeth slept peacefully in her cradle, her tiny hands curled into fists. "You have a way with him," Tessa observed, smiling at how naturally Hunter handled her son. "He's usually more fussy with strangers." Hunter grinned. "We men understand each other, don't we, Daniel?" he said, making the baby giggle. Then more seriously he added, "My brother and his wife have 5 children. I spent a lot of time with them before coming up to Montana." 5 children, Tessa mused. That sounds wonderful and chaotic. It is both, Hunter agreed with a chuckle. Their oldest is 12 now and the youngest just turned 2. I miss them, especially around Christmas. Tessa set 2 bowls of stew on the table. "Why did you leave Texas if your family was there?" A shadow passed over Hunter's face. "After the war things were difficult. My father died and the ranch was lost. My brother found work as a foreman on another spread, but there wasn't room for both of us. I remembered my uncle's place up here in Montana from when I was a boy, so I decided to see if I could make something of it." "Your uncle had a ranch near Deer Lodge?" Tessa asked, surprised. Hunter nodded. "The old Quinn place about 10 miles northwest of town. It's been sitting empty since he passed 5 years ago. I inherited it, but never had the means to come claim it until now. I spent the last 2 years driving cattle herds north, saving every penny." "So you're here to stay," Tessa said, oddly pleased by this news. "That's the plan," Hunter confirmed, carefully transferring Daniel back to his mother. "The cabin needs work, and I'll need to build up a herd come spring, but the land is good. 2,000 acres of prime Montana grassland." They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Hunter spoke again. "Tessa, I hope you don't mind me asking, but what happened to the twins' father?" The question, though gently asked, made Tessa tense. She set down her spoon, considering how to answer. "His name was James Taylor. He was passing through Deer Lodge last winter, working as a surveyor for the railroad. He was handsome, educated, charming." She trailed off, the memories still painful. "And you fell in love," Hunter finished for her. "I thought I did," Tessa admitted. "He talked about marriage, about taking me east to Boston where his family lived. I believed him." She glanced at her sleeping twins. "By the time I realized I was with child, he was long gone. I wrote to the address he'd given me, but the letters came back unopened. He'd never worked for the railroad at all. Hunter's expression darkened. Some men don't deserve the title. The worst part wasn't his betrayal, Tessa continued, the words pouring out now that she'd started. It was how quickly everyone I'd known my whole life turned against me. My father disowned me publicly. The church minister suggested I give up my babies for adoption to regain some measure of respectability. Women who'd been friends since childhood suddenly couldn't look me in the eye. "I'm sorry," Hunter said simply, reaching across the table to briefly touch her hand. "No one deserves that kind of treatment, especially not someone just trying to care for her children." Tessa blinked back tears. "Thank you for saying that, and for everything you've done for us. I don't know how we would have survived this winter without your help." "You'd have managed," Hunter replied with confidence. "You're stronger than you know, Tessa O'Connor." The conversation shifted to lighter topics, but something had changed between them. A deeper understanding, perhaps, or the foundation of a true friendship built on honesty. As Christmas approached, Tessa found herself looking forward to Hunter's visits with an eagerness that both thrilled and frightened her. She couldn't afford to open her heart again, not when she had her children to protect. And surely a man like Hunter, despite his kindness, would eventually want a woman without her complications, her scandal, her past. On Christmas Eve, Tessa was surprised by a knock at her door. She opened it to find Hunter standing there, his arms laden with packages wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. A small pine tree balanced precariously against his shoulder. "Merry Christmas," he announced, grinning broadly. "I thought the little ones deserved their first Christmas tree, even if they're too young to remember it." Tessa laughed in delight as he maneuvered the tree through the door. "Hunter Quinn, you are the most unexpected man I've ever met." Together they set up the tree in the corner of the cabin, using an old bucket filled with rocks to hold it steady. Hunter produced candles and small wooden ornaments he'd carved himself, little horses, stars, and angels that he hung carefully on the branches. "And these," he said, presenting the packages, "are for tomorrow morning. Nothing fancy, just some practical things and a few surprises." Tessa's eyes filled with tears. "I don't have anything for you." Hunter's expression softened. "Your friendship has been gift enough for a lonely cowboy far from home." He stayed for supper, and afterward they sat by the fire, the cabin fragrant with pine. The twins slept peacefully, and for the first time in months, Tessa felt something close to happiness. "I should be going," Hunter said finally, rising reluctantly. "It's getting late." "It's also getting colder," Tessa observed, peering out the window at the snow falling steadily. "Are you sure you want to ride all the way back to your place tonight?" Hunter hesitated. "I don't want to impose." "You've never been an imposition," Tessa assured him. "You can sleep by the fire. It's the least I can offer after everything you've done for us." After a moment's consideration, Hunter agreed. Tessa made him a pallet of blankets near the stove, then retired behind the curtain that separated her sleeping area from the main room of the cabin. As she lay in bed listening to Hunter's steady breathing, she realized with a start that for the first time since the twins' birth, she didn't feel alone. Christmas morning dawned clear and cold. Tessa woke to find Hunter already up, the fire built high and coffee brewing on the stove. The twins were awake too, lying contentedly in his lap as he told them a story about Christmas on the Texas plains. The day passed in a warm blur of simple pleasures. The packages Hunter had brought contained warm blankets for the twins, a beautiful shawl for Tessa, a set of carved wooden blocks for when the babies were older, and enough food for a proper Christmas feast. As twilight fell and Hunter prepared to leave, Tessa impulsively stood on tiptoe and kissed his cheek. "Thank you for giving us a real Christmas." Hunter caught her hand as she began to step away. For a long moment he simply looked at her, something unspoken passing between them. Then he squeezed her fingers gently and released them. "Merry Christmas, Tessa," he said softly, and was gone. The winter deepened, and with it, Tessa's feelings for Hunter. By February, the twins were crawling, filling the small cabin with their explorations and babbling. Hunter continued his regular visits, always bringing supplies, always spending time playing with the twins, always treating Tessa with a respect that gradually healed something broken inside her. One bright, crisp morning in early March, Tessa was hanging laundry outside her cabin, enjoying the rare warmth of winter sunshine, when she heard the unmistakable sound of approaching horses. Looking up, she was surprised to see not just Hunter, but 3 women from town riding toward her cabin: Mrs. Hampton, the banker's wife; Mrs. Wilson, the storekeeper's wife; and Mrs. Caldwell, who ran the local boarding house. Tessa tensed, instinctively moving toward the cabin where the twins were napping. These women had been among her harshest critics since her pregnancy had become known. "Miss O'Connor," Mrs. Hampton called out as they drew closer. "We'd like a word." Hunter dismounted first, his expression grim. "I tried to dissuade them from coming, Tessa," he said quietly as he approached, "but they were insistent." Before Tessa could respond, the 3 women had dismounted and arranged themselves in front of her like judges at a trial. "We've come about your arrangement with Mr. Quinn, Mrs. Wilson stated, her tone clipped. "There is no arrangement," Tessa replied, lifting her chin. "Mr. Quinn has been kind enough to help me through the winter. That's all." Mrs. Caldwell sniffed. "That's not what people are saying. The whole town is talking about how he spends his evenings here, leaving well after dark. And arriving before dawn sometimes," added Mrs. Hampton pointedly. Tessa felt her face flush with anger. "Mr. Quinn has never been anything but a perfect gentleman. Unlike some in this town, he doesn't believe my children and I deserve to starve or freeze because of others' judgments. Be that as it may," Mrs. Wilson continued, "your situation is already scandalous enough without adding more fuel to the fire. Mr. Quinn comes from one of the oldest families in the territory. His reputation is my own concern, ladies," Hunter interrupted, stepping forward. His voice was calm but firm. "I appreciate your concern, but how I spend my time and with whom is not up for community discussion." Mrs. Hampton drew herself up indignantly. "We are merely trying to prevent another tragedy. This young woman has already ruined her reputation once. We would hate to see yours tarnished as well, Mr. Quinn." "My reputation," Hunter replied evenly, "is built on how I treat people, not on who I choose to associate with. And I judge people by their character, not by gossip or past mistakes." The 3 women exchanged glances, clearly not having expected such direct resistance. "Well, Mrs. Caldwell said finally, "we've said our piece. We can only hope you'll reconsider your friendship before your standing in this community is irreparably damaged." With that, the women remounted their horses and rode away, their backs stiff with disapproval. Tessa released a shaky breath once they were out of sight. "I'm so sorry, Hunter. I never meant for you to be dragged into my disgrace." Hunter's expression was troubled as he turned to her. "You have nothing to apologize for. Their behavior is shameful, not yours." "Still," Tessa insisted, "maybe they're right. Your reputation in town is important, especially if you're planning to rebuild your uncle's ranch. People need to respect you to do business with you. My friendship could make that difficult." Hunter was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. "Tessa," he said finally, "I need to ask you something, and I want an honest answer." "Of course," she replied, her heart suddenly racing. "Would you be happier if I stopped coming around? Not because of what those women or anyone else thinks, but for your own peace of mind." If my presence is making your life more difficult, just say the word, and I'll keep my distance." The thought of not seeing Hunter regularly made Tessa's chest ache with a pain she hadn't expected. Over the past months, he had become not just her benefactor but her friend, someone who made her laugh, who treated her children with genuine affection, who looked at her and saw a woman worthy of respect rather than censure. "No," she said softly. "Your friendship has been the one bright spot in a very dark time for me. I'd miss you terribly if you stayed away." Relief washed over Hunter's face. "Good," he said simply, "because I'd miss you and those little ones something fierce." They stood in companionable silence for a moment before Hunter spoke again. "I actually came by today with news. The snow's melting in the high country and the passes should be clear soon. I'm planning to head down to Texas to buy cattle for the ranch. I'll be gone for at least 2 months. Tessa felt a pang of disappointment but forced a smile. "That's wonderful, Hunter. You're finally starting to build your dream." "Part of it," he agreed, "but I'm worried about leaving you and the twins. Winter's not quite done with Montana yet." "We'll be fine," Tessa assured him, though the thought of facing the town's hostility without Hunter's steadying presence was daunting. "I've been taking in more laundry and mending. We have enough to get by." Hunter looked unconvinced. "I'll stock your woodpile before I go and leave money for supplies." "You don't need to," Tessa began to protest, but Hunter raised a hand to stop her. "Please, Tessa. It would ease my mind while I'm away. Consider it a loan if your pride demands it, but let me do this for you." In the end, Tessa agreed, knowing it would be foolish to refuse. The next week was a flurry of preparations as Hunter readied for his journey. He repaired her roof, reinforced the cabin's walls against spring storms, split enough firewood to last until summer, and brought sacks of flour, beans, coffee, and other staples that filled her small pantry to overflowing. The day before his departure, Hunter arrived with one final surprise: a milk cow, placidly following his horse on a lead rope. "Her name's Daisy," he explained as Tessa stared in astonishment. "She's gentle as can be, freshened about a month ago, and gives more milk than you and the twins can drink. You can sell the extra in town for a bit of cash." Tessa walked slowly toward the cow, stroking her soft nose. "Hunter, I can't accept this. She must have cost a small fortune." "Consider her on loan like everything else," Hunter replied with a smile. "I'll need a dairy cow at the ranch eventually anyway." That evening, as they sat by the fire after the twins were asleep, a wistful mood settled over them. Tomorrow, Hunter would be gone, and the comfortable routine they'd established would be broken. "I wish you weren't going," Tessa admitted quietly. 2 months seems like such a long time." Hunter reached over and took her hand. "I'll be back before you know it, and then—" He paused, seeming to struggle with his words. "Tessa, there's something I've been meaning to ask you." Tessa's heart fluttered nervously. "What is it?" But Hunter shook his head, withdrawing his hand. "It can wait until I return. It's not something to rush into." Despite Tessa's curiosity, Hunter wouldn't be drawn out further. He left the next morning with promises to return by early June, his tall figure gradually disappearing down the trail toward Deer Lodge. The weeks after Hunter's departure were harder than Tessa had anticipated. Spring in Montana was a capricious season, with warm, sunny days followed by bitter cold and late snowstorms. The twins began to pull themselves up on furniture, requiring constant vigilance. The cow, Daisy, provided more milk than expected, and Tessa found herself making butter and cheese, some of which she hesitantly took to town to sell. The reception she received was mixed. Some, like Mrs. Whitaker the midwife, were civil, purchasing her dairy products without comment. Others refused to buy from her at all, and always there were whispers about her relationship with Hunter Quinn. I heard he only left because she was getting too attached. Well, I heard he promised to marry her, but then got cold feet when he realized what he was taking on. Those poor little bastards. They'll grow up with her shame hanging over them. Tessa endured it all with outward dignity, though each barb stung. She wrote to Hunter weekly, sending the letters with the stagecoach driver who passed near her cabin. His replies, when they came, were infrequent but treasured brief descriptions of Texas, the cattle he was purchasing, the plans for his ranch, always ending with warm inquiries about her and the twins. By late May, the twins were nearly a year old, taking their first tentative steps, their personalities emerging more clearly each day. Daniel was bold and adventurous, while Elizabeth was thoughtful and observant. Both had Tessa's copper hair and fair skin, though Daniel's eyes had darkened to a rich brown that sometimes made Tessa's heart clench with memories of James Taylor. As June approached, Tessa found herself watching the trail from town with increasing anticipation. Hunter had promised to return by early June, and she couldn't deny the excitement she felt at the thought of seeing him again. It was on the first day of June, a perfect Montana morning with wildflowers dotting the meadows and birds singing in the pine trees, that Tessa looked up from her garden to see a cloud of dust approaching from the direction of Deer Lodge. As it drew closer, she made out a herd of cattle, at least 100 head, being driven by several mounted cowboys. At their head rode a familiar figure on a bay gelding. Tessa's heart leaped. She straightened, brushing dirt from her skirt, suddenly conscious of her appearance after a morning of gardening. The twins, who had been playing in a makeshift pen nearby, sensed her excitement and began babbling happily. Hunter rode ahead of the herd, pulling up his horse just yards from where Tessa stood. For a long moment they simply looked at each other, Hunter's face breaking into a wide smile that Tessa couldn't help but return. "You're back," she said, suddenly shy. Hunter swung down from his saddle, looking more rugged than when he'd left, his skin darkened by the southern sun, his frame perhaps a bit leaner from the hard journey. "I told you I would be," he replied, his eyes never leaving her face. Before Tessa could respond, the twins noticed the visitor and began calling out excitedly, reaching their arms toward him. Hunter laughed, crossing to their pen and lifting both children at once. "Look at you two," he exclaimed as they patted his bearded face curiously. "Standing up and everything." "You've grown so much." One of the other cowboys rode up, touching his hat respectfully to Tessa. "Boss, we'll move the herd on to the Quinn place. You can catch up when you're ready." Hunter nodded, still focused on the twins. "Thanks, Pete, I'll be along shortly." As the cattle drive continued past the cabin, raising dust and lowing softly, Hunter set the children down and turned back to Tessa. Something in his expression made her pulse quicken. "Tessa," he said, his voice serious now, "I've been thinking about what I wanted to say to you for 2 months now. Rehearsing it on the trail, under the stars, trying to find the right words." "And did you find them?" Tessa asked softly. Hunter stepped closer, reaching for her hands. "I don't know, but I know what I feel. These past months, getting to know you and the twins, seeing your strength, your kindness, your determination. I've never met a woman like you." Tessa's heart was pounding so hard she wondered if Hunter could hear it. "Hunter, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that I love you, Tessa O'Connor. And I love those children as if they were my own. I'm saying that I want to build a life with you, all of you, at my ranch. I want to give Daniel and Elizabeth my name, to raise them alongside any other children we might be blessed with." He paused, his hazel eyes intense. "I'm asking you to marry me." Tessa felt tears spring to her eyes. "Are you certain? You know what people say about me, about the twins." "I've never been more certain of anything," Hunter replied firmly. "And as for what people say, let them talk." In time, they'll see what I already know, that you're the strongest, most loving woman in Montana territory, and I'm the luckiest man alive if you'll have me." "Yes," Tessa whispered, the tears flowing freely now. "Yes, I'll marry you." Hunter's face lit with joy. He pulled her close, his lips finding hers in a kiss that was tender at first, then deepening with a passion that left Tessa breathless. When they finally broke apart, Hunter rested his forehead against hers. "I was so afraid you'd say no," he admitted. "That you wouldn't want to take a chance on another man after what happened before." Tessa touched his face gently. "You're nothing like him, Hunter. You've proven that 1,000 times over, and I've loved you for months now, though I was too afraid to admit it even to myself." Hunter kissed her again, and might have continued if not for the twins' insistent babbling from their pen. Laughing, he released Tessa and went to pick up Daniel, who was reaching for him impatiently. "How soon can we be married?" Hunter asked, bouncing the boy on his hip. "I've got the ranch house mostly habitable, though it needs a woman's touch." "As soon as you like," Tessa replied, lifting Elizabeth. "Though I'm not sure who will perform the ceremony. Reverend Phillips hasn't spoken to me since the twins were born." Hunter's expression hardened slightly. "Leave that to me. We'll be married properly in church if that's what you want, with the whole town invited to witness it." 2 weeks later, Tessa stood nervously in a back room of the Deer Lodge Church, wearing a simple blue dress that Hunter had insisted on buying her in town. Elizabeth and Daniel, freshly bathed and dressed in new clothes, played quietly at her feet, occasionally pulling themselves up on her skirts. There was a soft knock at the door, and Mrs. Whittaker, the midwife, entered. She had been one of the few people in town to maintain some kindness toward Tessa over the past year. "It's time, dear," she said with a warm smile. "And my, don't you look beautiful? Hunter Quinn is a lucky man." Tessa took a deep breath, gathering Elizabeth into her arms while Mrs. Whittaker picked up Daniel. "I'm the lucky one," she replied softly. They made their way to the church entrance. To Tessa's surprise, the small building was full. It seemed everyone in Deer Lodge had turned out for the wedding, though whether from genuine goodwill or morbid curiosity, she couldn't be sure. At the front of the church stood Hunter, more handsome than Tessa had ever seen him, in a new black suit, his dark hair neatly trimmed, his face freshly shaven. Beside him was Reverend Phillips, whose initial reluctance to perform the ceremony had apparently been overcome by whatever Hunter had said to him. As Tessa walked slowly down the aisle, Elizabeth in her arms and Daniel toddling beside her holding Mrs. Whittaker's hand, she felt the weight of 100 stares. But for once, she didn't care. The only gaze that mattered was Hunter's, and his eyes never left hers, filled with such love and pride that it brought tears to her own. When they reached the altar, Hunter stepped forward, taking Elizabeth from Tessa's arms and then reaching for Daniel, who came to him willingly. "Dearly beloved," began Reverend Phillips, his voice carrying through the silent church, "we are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." The ceremony was brief but beautiful. Hunter and Tessa exchanged simple vows, promising to love, honor, and cherish each other for the rest of their lives. When Hunter slipped a gold band onto Tessa's finger, another surprise he'd arranged without her knowledge, she felt as though her heart might burst with happiness. "By the power vested in me," Reverend Phillips concluded, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Mr. Quinn, you may kiss your bride." Hunter handed the twins to Mrs. Whittaker, then took Tessa in his arms, kissing her with a tenderness that made several of the women in the congregation sigh audibly. When they turned to face the assembled townspeople, Hunter's arm firmly around Tessa's waist, there was a moment of awkward silence before someone, Tessa thought it might have been Mr. Wilson, began to applaud. Others joined in, and soon the church was filled with applause and a few cheers. The reception was held at the town hall, another surprise Hunter had arranged. There was food, music, and dancing, with the twins passed from arm to arm, suddenly the darlings of Deer Lodge rather than its scandal. Tessa noticed that while some of her harshest critics, like Mrs. Hampton, maintained a cool distance, others seemed genuinely happy to welcome her back into the community's good graces. "People are fickle," Mrs. Whittaker observed, coming to stand beside Tessa as she watched Hunter dancing with Elizabeth in his arms, the little girl squealing with delight. "Yesterday you were a fallen woman. Today you're Mrs. Hunter Quinn, wife of one of the wealthiest ranchers in the territory." "I don't care what they think anymore," Tessa replied honestly. "I have everything I need." As evening fell, Hunter and Tessa prepared to leave for their new home. The Quinn Ranch, which Tessa had yet to see, was about 10 miles from town, close enough for occasional visits, but far enough to provide privacy. Hunter helped Tessa and the sleepy twins into a new buggy, another wedding gift he'd surprised her with. As they drove away from town, the summer twilight painting the mountains in shades of purple and gold, Tessa leaned against her husband's shoulder, a sense of peace washing over her. "Happy, Mrs. Quinn?" Hunter asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Tessa replied truthfully. The Quinn Ranch came into view just as the first stars appeared in the sky, a sprawling 2-story house set against a backdrop of pine-covered hills, with corrals, barns, and outbuildings spread across a wide, grassy valley. Lights gleamed welcomingly from the windows. "Welcome home," Hunter said softly as he helped Tessa down from the buggy, the twins now fast asleep in her arms. Inside, Tessa discovered that Hunter had spared no expense in preparing the house for her arrival. The furniture was simple but well made, the room spacious and clean, with fresh curtains at the windows and a nursery already set up for the twins with 2 small beds and a rocking chair. After settling the children, Tessa joined Hunter in the main room where he had built a fire despite the summer warmth. "I know it's not necessary," he explained with a smile, "but I wanted everything to be perfect for our first night home." Tessa went to him, wrapping her arms around his waist and resting her head against his chest. "It is perfect, all of it." Hunter tilted her face up to his. "I have one more wedding gift for you," he said, reaching into his pocket and producing a folded document. "I had this prepared while I was in town last week." Curious, Tessa opened the paper. It was a legal document, and as she read the formal language, her eyes widened in surprise. "Adoption papers," she whispered, looking up at Hunter. He nodded, his expression serious. "If you agree, I want to legally adopt Daniel and Elizabeth. They would become Daniel and Elizabeth Quinn in the eyes of the law, with all the rights and privileges of my natural children. No one could ever question their legitimacy or their place in this family." Tears filled Tessa's eyes for what felt like the 100th time that day. "Hunter Quinn, you are the most remarkable man I have ever known. Yes, of course I agree." Hunter's smile was radiant as he pulled her close. "We're a family now, Tessa, all 4 of us. And no one, not the gossips in town, not the memory of the past, not anything can change that." As summer turned to autumn, and autumn to winter, the Quinn family settled into a rhythm of ranch life. Hunter proved to be as skilled a rancher as he was a husband and father, gradually building his herd and earning a reputation for fair dealing and quality stock. Tessa found unexpected joy in her role as the mistress of a large ranch, managing the household, creating a warm and loving home for her family, and even assisting with the accounts, discovering a head for numbers she hadn't known she possessed. The twins thrived in their new environment, growing stronger and more adventurous each day. They followed Hunter around the ranch like faithful puppies, squealing with delight when he lifted them onto his horse for short rides around the corral. By their second birthday, both were talking in short sentences and developing distinct personalities, Daniel bold and impetuous, Elizabeth thoughtful and observant. Relations with the town improved gradually. Hunter's position as a successful rancher and employer commanded respect, and Tessa's new status as his wife opened doors that had previously been closed to her. If some still whispered about her past, they did so quietly and out of the Quinn's hearing. In the spring of 1878, nearly 2 years after their wedding, Tessa discovered she was expecting another child. The news filled the household with joy, especially when the town doctor confirmed that this time it appeared to be just one baby. "Not that twins aren't a blessing," Hunter reassured her, holding her close. "But perhaps we could space out our blessings a bit." On a clear November morning with snow dusting the distant mountains, Tessa gave birth to a healthy son they named William Patrick Quinn. Unlike the twins' birth, this one was attended not just by Mrs. Whittaker, but by several neighboring ranch wives who had become Tessa's friends, bringing food and offering support during her labor. As Tessa nursed her newborn son, with Hunter beside her and the twins now 3.5 years old peering curiously at their new brother, she marveled at how completely her life had transformed. "What are you thinking?" Hunter asked, noticing her pensive expression. "I was remembering the day the twins were born," Tessa replied softly. "How alone I felt, how afraid, and now look at us." Hunter leaned over to kiss her forehead. "You were never meant to be alone, Tessa. Sometimes life just takes a winding path to get us where we belong." 3 years later, their family grew again with the birth of a daughter, Sarah Grace. By then, the Quinn Ranch had expanded to become one of the most successful operations in Montana Territory, with a growing herd of cattle, several hired hands, and a reputation that extended as far as Chicago, where Hunter sold his beef. The twins, now 6 years old, were preparing to start school in Deer Lodge. There had been some initial concerns about how they would be treated, but those fears proved largely unfounded. They were known throughout the area as the Quinn children, and if anyone remembered the circumstances of their birth, they had the good sense not to mention it within Hunter's hearing. On a warm summer evening, as Tessa sat on the front porch of their ranch house watching Hunter teach Daniel and Elizabeth to throw a lasso while baby Sarah slept in her lap, and 4-year-old William built an elaborate fort with sticks nearby, she felt a contentment so deep it brought tears to her eyes. Mrs. Whittaker, who had become a regular visitor, and something of a grandmother figure to the children, settled into the rocking chair beside her. "You know," the older woman observed, "I've delivered hundreds of babies in my time, but I don't think I've ever seen a happier ending than yours, Tessa Quinn." Tessa smiled, watching as Hunter praised Elizabeth for a perfect throw. "It's not an ending," she replied. "It's a beginning that keeps unfolding, every single day." As if sensing her gaze, Hunter looked up, his smile as warm and genuine as it had been that first day in Wilson's store when he'd offered to hold Elizabeth. He said something to the twins, then jogged up to the porch, leaning down to kiss Tessa tenderly. "What was that for?" she asked, smiling up at him. "For being you," Hunter replied simply. "For making every day better than the last." As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the ranch in shades of gold and amber, Tessa thought about the journey that had brought her here from scandal and shame to love and family. The twins, once her disgrace in the eyes of Deer Lodge, were now her pride, growing into kind, confident children under Hunter's loving guidance. And Hunter himself, who had seen beyond her past to the woman she truly was, who had made her children his own without hesitation, who had built with her a life more beautiful than she could have imagined. He was the true gift. Not just because he had given her and her children his name, making them legitimate in the eyes of society, but because he had given them his heart, making them a family in all the ways that truly mattered. "I love you," she whispered, reaching up to touch his face. Hunter covered her hand with his own. "And I love you, always will, till the day I die." It was a promise Tessa knew he would keep, as surely as the sun would rise over their ranch tomorrow, bringing another day of the life they had built together, a life founded on love, strengthened by challenges overcome, and blessed beyond measure.